Please state your name and your current address.
My name is Alan Gard. I live at 66 St. Clair Drive, Del Mar, New York.
In what year did you join the U.S. Navy?
1943.
Was your commission a reserve commission?
Not at that point.
Did you enlist as an officer or an enlisted man?
Well, the Navy had a program when I was in college. I went to Notre Dame, and I was in the first ROTC class at Notre Dame, starting in 1941. And in 1943, the Navy had to sign up as enlisted personnel to protect our status as students. So I went on active duty July 1st, 43. I was commissioned in February of 44.
When you enlisted, how old were you?
18.
Where were you living when you enlisted?
At Notre Dame, Indiana.
Do you have any prior sea experiences?
Prior what?
Do you have any prior experiences at sea?
Yeah, I used to sail in Comet sailboats and Star sailboats when I was a kid. I don't call that sea duty, but close to the water as I got, I think. I also went on the liner Berengaria in New York City about 1932, I would guess. I did see some ocean there.
What family did you leave when you left home for the Navy?
Well, I had 3 brothers, and, mother and father.
What were your feelings about leaving?
I was ready to go. I was, in those days, you know, everything went along and you went with the flow. I guess that was the way it was. I was probably ambivalent about going or staying, but everybody was going, so I went.
What did you do in your civilian life?
Student.
Were you employed?
No.
Were you a Boy Scout?
Yep.
Did any aspect of your scouting help prepare you for your Navy experiences?
Oh, I'd say so. I think scouting prepares you for life. I think it's a great organization. I think it helps you plan, it helps you establish goals, and it helps you to plan to reach those goals.
When you joined, what were your first experiences?
Joining what?
The Navy.
Well, when I joined the Navy, I was already a student at Notre Dame, and my ROTC classes were going on, so they just continued. I don't think I had any feelings like, way, I'm here, you know. Just a continuation of my day-to-day life, student activity in my particular case.
Did you receive any additional training in a specialty?
I went to Subchaser Training School in Miami, Florida, after I got commissioned. My first sea duty was right after commissioning. The Navy had a policy of sending newly commissioned officers overseas, and I went on a convoy to the Mediterranean, and then went back to SCTC, Subchaser Training School at Miami after that.
What was the destroyer escort which you served on? Name and numbers.
I actually served on 3. I served on the Everts, the DE-5, the Walter S. Brown, the DE-258, and the Albert M. Moore was my final ship, DE-442.
What was your first experience of a destroyer escort?
In what way? What was my first experience?
Yeah.
Well, basically, I was a trainee. I was put on board to observe and learn, and my battle station was the 1.1 gun tub director, and I was pretty superfluous, actually, but I was there for training, and that's what I did.
Did the ship appear small or large when you first saw it?
I thought it was pretty big.
What was your first at-sea experience?
My first at-sea experience. Well, I think I had 2 that stick in my mind. we left Norfolk on a convoy called UGS 40, and we went to the Mediterranean. On the way by Gibraltar, a Navy tug came out towing a destroyer escort with its stern blown off by a German acoustical torpedo. And that was very interesting to me because my quarters were right over the screws, and that's where the torpedo hit. So I said, well, guard, maybe you're not going to come back out of here. That was my first thought about my future in the Navy. The second one, May 11th, 1944, we were off just past Algiers. We suffered a German air attack, torpedo attack around dusk, and that's where I was in the 1.1 gun tub, pointing my broom handle at enemy planes as they came in. And the convoy was so adept at maneuvering the convoy that not a ship got hit, and they shot down several German planes. And that was a big thing. It was my first taste of action.
Were you a plank owner?
A what?
A plank owner, a member of
No,
the first crew
no,
of the ship?
No.
Where did the ship go next?
Well, the ship went back to New York, and from New York I went down to Subchaser Training Center in Miami for 2 months of anti-submarine warfare training.
What theaters of duty did the ship sail?
I didn't catch the first part of that.
What theaters of duty did the ship sail?
I still didn't get it. What?
Theaters of duty?
Theaters of duty. Atlantic, Pacific.
Oh, theaters. Pardon me. All right. Well, obviously the Atlantic theater was my introduction to warfare, you might say, going into the Mediterranean. And when I picked up my final ship, that was in the Pacific. I neglected to mention, I mentioned 3 DEs, and the reason was I went over on the Walter S. Brown, and on the return trip they needed another watch officer on the Everett, so they transferred me over to the Everetts. So I stood watches on the Everetts coming back. And then I went into the 442 in September of 44.
What battle campaigns did the ship participate in when you were on board?
Well, our first action was the invasion of Luzon in the Philippines. That was in December of 44. We then went back to Ulithi, which was our main fleet anchorage at the time, and we geared up for Iwo Jima, and from Iwo Jima we went back to Ulithi and filled up again and headed out for Okinawa. Our duty was we primarily served as a screen for the invasion forces, and our carrier provided air support, but most of the time in between the regular invasions we were a hunter-killer group looking for submarines.
Can you give us a rough idea of the other places your ship sailed to and the times involved, the chronology?
If I understand the question, you want me to go into some detail about the places?
It was pretty much answered.
Yeah.
When you first boarded a ship, what was your rank and what division did you run? Or help run?
I was an ensign when I was commissioned, and I was an ensign until July of 1945 when I became a junior grade lieutenant. I was initially assigned to the deck division. That's the one that runs all the lines and the gears and lowers the whaleboat and anything else to do with housekeeping. It's called the Assistant First Lieutenant.
How did you learn about the shipboard routine? How did you learn about the shipboard routine?
Just by observation and studying whatever manuals were available to you and just doing it, I guess, basically. I must say, as a junior officer, you weren't expected to know a whole lot. I guess maybe that saved me, I don't know.
The training you received prior to joining the ship serve you well?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it gave me a great background, probably more than a lot of people had. I was in the ROTC program over 3.5 years before I got commissioned. And they were commissioning officers after 90 days in some situations.
Do you remember your first command decision?
First command decision? No. I'm not sure I gave any commands. I followed a lot of them.
What shipboard equipment did your men operate?
Well, as part of the, I didn't personally operate anything. Is that what you meant?
The men that were under you.
Well, if you're part of the 1st or 2nd Division, your job is to run all the moving equipment, dropping the anchor, hauling in the anchor, lowering the motor whale boat, lifting the motor whale boat, running lines up and down the deck to get fuel lines on board, or taking a bosun's chair over to another ship, or a Stokes stretcher, or whatever. Anything to do with deck gear, that's what we did.
Did the equipment have to be cleaned and maintained?
Oh yeah, absolutely, or it didn't work.
Was it easy to maintain?
No, I didn't do it personally, but we had fellows that did, and that was their job.
Did you advance to a higher rank?
I did. I got promoted in July of '45 to lieutenant junior grade.
Did your responsibilities change?
Well, I was probably a little more savvy by that time, and I was expected to know a little bit more, especially if we had ensigns on board under me. That was a good feeling. I wasn't the lowest of the low at that point.
What watches and watch sections did you routinely stand?
Well, we always stood watch with another more senior officer. We made a team. One would stand watch on the bridge for 2 hours, and one would stand in the CIC room for 2 hours, and at the end of that period we'd switch over, and one in CIC would go to the bridge and vice versa.
What hardships did you encounter while standing watch?
Can't remember a thing. I don't recall any hardships.
Were you cold, hot, wet? Did the watches get tiring or boring?
They were kind of cold in the Atlantic, and in the Pacific they were hot. There was no air conditioning on this ship. You had ambient air being pumped through the ship at all times, but whatever that was, that's what you got. In the Atlantic you had heat, so that was good. That part of it was good, but when you were hot, everybody was hot.
Did you have the same basic duties and responsibilities during general quarters, or did your duties change?
Well, that's an interesting point. I've thought about this interview. What did I do during general quarters? Well, most of the time I was an ensign. I got promoted in July of '45, and the war was over the next month. But when I was an ensign, I was officer of the deck during general quarters. Well, what did that mean? That meant they put me somewhere where I couldn't do much damage, because the captain always had the con at general quarters. So I was kind of I would call myself kind of a supercargo. They didn't know quite what to do with me during general quarters, but there I was.
How long would you remain at general quarters?
As long as it took. It's hard to say. You could be at general quarters for hours, depending on the activity in the area. Very tense times.
How frequently would you be called to general quarters?
You're in the forward area, like Luzon or Okinawa. Iwo Jima wasn't quite that busy, it seemed, but you could 6 or 8 times during the course of a day easily. You could be up at general quarters, and for long periods of time, perhaps.
Did you perform general quarters drills often?
No, we had so many general quarters called, we didn't have to drill.
How long would it take to man general quarters?
It took, you were on your station usually within a minute or two.
And the more you went to general quarters, did the time improve?
Did what?
The more times you guys had to go to general quarters, did the times it took to get there improve?
Improve? Sure. The more you do something, the better you get, I think.
What special details were you involved with?
Yeah, and what surroundings? I don't understand that question.
Special C.
Special C details.
Well, special C details usually meant getting underway or anchoring or mooring, and I was always on the forecastle during those procedures. I don't know if I contributed much, but I was up there. We had a very efficient first lieutenant. We had a very efficient chief boatswain's mate, and both those guys knew what they were doing, and I don't think they let me get in the way too often.
Did you have an active role during underway refueling or replenishment details?
Not really.
Did you ever ride on the bosun's chair during a ship-to-ship transfer?
Fortunately, no. Or I would have been dipped, I'm sure.
What leadership issues did you face?
What?
What leadership issues did you face?
I don't know how to answer that. I have no answer for that.
Were you ever concerned with the morale?
I don't think I had any active participation in morale situations.
Or maintaining proper discipline?
Well, I think you did a lot of that by example.
What officer-related duties or responsibilities did you find the toughest?
Looking back, I don't have any recollection of toughest or whatever.
How did you learn your leadership skills?
Well, you get 3.5 years of college before I got commissioned. I had a lot of that drilled into me by Navy instructors.
Did your scout experiences help you with leadership?
Did it what?
Did your scout experiences help you with leadership?
Sure.
While on destroyer escorts, who were your COs?
Who were they or what were they?
Who were they?
Well, I don't remember the first two. I mean by name. What were their name or what were their rank or?
Either.
Most destroyer escort captains, when I was first in the Navy, were full lieutenants. And as the war progressed, we got more lieutenant commanders in charge of destroyer escorts. The skipper on the Everts and the Walter S. Brown were both full lieutenants, and the skipper on the 442 was lieutenant commander.
What leadership style did they use?
Well, they were all reserve officers, and each had its own version. Each had their own version of leadership. I don't know how I can specifically answer that any better than that. I would say they were all, instead of being stern and imperious, they were kind of laid back and friendly. I would say.
Were they by the book?
Yes, but a soft book.
What was your overall impression of the quality of other officers?
I think we did very well. I think we were lucky to have the quality of officers we had during World War II. I think by and large, the skippers that came out of World War II were exceptional and very, very qualified, and again knew what they were doing. I think it was good.
Did you observe a contrast between the CO's leadership style and the leadership style of the XO?
Well, the XO was the guy waiting in the wings, and I don't think he probably exercised much leadership style because it wasn't his time to do so. When he became skipper, why then you saw what you got, but I don't think before that you really had a a big clue as to what the XO style might be. You knew what the captain's was because you lived with it every day.
What was your impression about the chiefs or leading petty officers?
Well, I would think of them when I was 20 years old. I thought of them as grizzled and gnarled and sea-wise and everything else. Very, very competent guys, and they certainly ran a lot of arcane programs. At least they were arcane to me at the time, and I was very impressed with the chiefs. I don't think they were as impressed with me as I was with them. Sir.
Any comments on storms or rough weather?
Storm? Yeah, we did. We had our share of that. My first recollection of really heavy weather was coming through the Panama Canal and going up off the coast of Mexico. And I think a lot of stuff hit the deck during that. It was our clinometer probably went over to 40 or 50 degrees, and after a while we passed through that and went on into San Diego. But that was probably some of the roughest weather we ever had. And then we were in the typhoon in December '44 when 3 U.S. destroyers turned over and floated away upside down. But we survived that one, and I think to the credit of reserve officers, the destroyer escorts all came through that storm very well.
Did your ship participate with convoy duty?
Oh, yes. We went, as I said earlier, we went over to Bizerte and Mediterranean with convoy UGS 40, and every time we went to an invasion, we were part of a convoy. We were always in the screen protecting whoever was on the inside.
Was the convoy routine monotonous or grueling?
Say that again.
Was the convoy routine monotonous or grueling?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Monotonous or grueling?
Convoy duty is very boring. I remember UGS 40 convoy, and we were what they called tail end Charlie, and you had the circular screen around 60 some odd merchant ships, but at the back there wasn't anybody but us, and the convoy is moving this way, and we're going up and down all day long at the tail end of the convoy. And you'd make these turns, and then you'd go back, and you'd go back, and you'd go back, and that was pretty boring stuff. But hey, dirty job, but somebody had to do it, right?
I understand that your ship, the USS Moore, was involved with anti-submarine action against RO-115. Would you care to relate your personal experiences during this action?
Yeah. I said earlier I was officer of the deck during general quarters, so I had a pretty good bird's eye view of the action. U.S. destroyer flushed a Japanese submarine on the surface at night, and we were going by on our way back to Ulithi, as I recall, and they called us over. It was either the Bell or the O'Bannon, and they called us over, and we made 7 hedgehog attacks on it. And on the 7th attack, I was on the bridge, and I could see this like it was yesterday, and I tell all my tour people about this. We got a hit on the submarine, and the whole surface of the ocean lit up with a brilliant greenish white light. And we searched around. It was at night. We searched around, did not find a lot of debris, but so we got credit for a probable. When you get hit by a hedgehog, it goes off on contact, so we knew we had hit it. And after the war, Japanese records revealed that we had indeed sunk the submarine RO-115. Reportedly, it was evacuating Japanese Army brass from Luzon. I mean brass, I mean high-ranking officers. And that was the extent of that.
I understand that your ship, the USS Moore, was involved with several anti-aircraft actions during the Okinawa, Iwo Jima, Luzon campaign. Would you care to relate your personal experiences during this action?
Well, those were scary times for me. Off the coast of Luzon, I think it was January 5th, 1945, on the way to the Luzon invasion. and we got a heavy Japanese air attack off our port bow, and I can still see those planes coming in low off the water, maybe 20, 30 feet up, and we opened up on them, and we had a lot of firepower. We had two 5-inch guns and two 40s and a bunch of 20s, and we got one on that, and this happened, same thing happened like 3 days in a row, heavy Japanese air attacks, and as a result of that, we shot down 3 planes. One of the ships in our division was right ahead of us, and it got crashed by a kamikaze, and we had to stay out there with that ship, protecting it for 2 or 3 days until a Navy tug came and took it away. But all that time we were being harassed by Japanese planes and being strafed. We didn't get hit, but nevertheless, it was we were their target. I remember one plane came in from astern, and he strafed us, and then he flew over the entire port side of our ship, wingtip, right on the wingtip to wingtip, straight up and down. It was exposed the whole underside of his plane, and we shot it down. That's what we were out there for. We had a similar experience. We were Iwo Jima was kind of quiet for us. We were our planes flew off the carrier to support the troops, but and then we did our anti-submarine patrolling. But Okinawa was another case where there was a lot of air attacks, and one particularly sticks in my mind. We were anchored in a place called Karama-Reto. It's a small group of rocks southwest of Okinawa, and the Allies had seized it earlier and made a seaplane base out of it. And we were in there with our carrier, the Tulagi, and this one particular Jap plane came in from the south through the open anchorage, and it was either going to be us or an LST, and for some reason he veered off and smacked right into the LST about 500 yards away from us, and that could have been us. It was just a fluke that we didn't get hit by that plane. And those are about my main recollections of air action.
I understand that your ship, the USS Moore, was involved with the rescue of pickets. Would you care to comment on your pilots? Would you care to comment on your personal experiences during the rescue?
A pilot? Well, we were, as part of our air operations, we were designated as plane guard, which meant you were stationed about 500 yards off the starboard quarter of the carrier, and your job was to pick up pilots if any planes went into the drink. And planes did go into the drink. Are we talking about what you want to talk about? Okay. And quite often we'd go over, and if the pilots survived the crash, and some of them didn't, if the pilots survived, we'd pick them up, and then we'd hold them on board until it came a good time to return them to the carrier, and we sent them over on the bosun's chair that you mentioned earlier, and the carrier always sent us back ice cream for every pilot we delivered, so we were always looking for pilots. We didn't have an ice cream machine on our DE, so that was good. We picked quite a few pilots out of the drink. May I elaborate on that a little bit? Yeah. We picked a pilot up, returned to the carrier, and we went into this place called Karama-Reto that I mentioned earlier, and we suffered this Japanese air attack. And our carrier, although he was anchored, was able to catapult a plane into the air to help fight off these planes. Well, that poor sucker, he got up over there was mountain ridges running through here. He just cleared the mountain ridge, and all these merchant ships opened up on this F4F. And the guy was up about, I would say, 1,500, 2,000 feet. And he just totally in flames, totally engulfed in flames. And he just rolled over, totally in flames, and the pilot bailed out. He was safe, and he came down in his parachute, not near us, near the carrier, which we couldn't see because it was over on the other side of a ridge there. And darn if it wasn't that same guy we had picked out of the drink, and that was his first flight since he'd gone back to the carrier and resumed duty. Oh, he was a lucky guy.
I understand that the UM Moore CO was Franklin Delano Roosevelt Jr.
Correct.
Do you have any anecdotes to share of us?
Yeah, probably. FDR Jr. was a heck of a skipper. He was extremely professional. He knew ship handling. He knew gunnery. He had come from the Mayrant, a Benham-class destroyer in the Mediterranean, where he'd earned the Silver Star rescuing a crewman under fire, and also got the Purple Heart because he got hit by shrapnel in that same rescue. And again, thoroughly professional man. But he also, when he got off the ship, he liked to play, and there was very few diversions when you're at sea for a long time. So if he could afford to play, why, that's good. So he was good at that. And I recall one time we were, I think, anchored in Guam or Saipan, one of those places, and he went off the ship about 8 a.m. I had the 8 to 12 watch. And the way we rotated the watch, I was on the midnight to 4 a.m. He came aboard sometime from between midnight and 4 a.m. and he comes up the ladder from the whaleboat and he looks at me. He said, I don't know if anybody else thinks this is funny, but I think it's funny. He looks at me and said, "My God, Alan, you still on watch?" Like I'd been on watch all the time that he'd been ashore and having a good time. No, it's the way the watch rotated, Skipper. But I didn't dare tell him that, of course. But he was feeling no pain, and that's okay. Anecdotes, I don't know. That's one that comes to mind. I don't know that I can think of any other ones, but a great guy.
What about meals on board the ship?
Well, there were 3 of them a day. As officers, you got served your meals by steward's mates, and you paid $21 a month into the kitty to pay for your food, which wasn't bad. $21. Of course, you're looking at today's $21, and $21 in those days was a pretty good piece of money. When I got commissioned, I think I got paid $150 a month, and I thought I'd hit Fort Knox when that happened.
Was the food good?
Food was good. I always thought it was good. One of the trade-offs we made, I recall, from the Australian cruiser HMAS Australia, we transferred some food. We transferred them some of our butter, and they gave us back frozen rabbit. That was my first experience with rabbit. It was very good.
Was the quality of food consistent during good and bad weather?
Well, the longer you're out, the worse it got. I mean, if you didn't get replenished, why you had to go into the staples, and your fresh food didn't exist, your fruit disappeared, things like that. So you got into a lot of navy beans and things like that. But
did you have an unlimited supply of water?
Unlimited? Well, no, you had to be careful with your water. We evaporated all our fresh water from salt water, but I think you were limited to, it was an honor system, you were limited to the length of time you could spend in the shower and that sort of thing. But other than that, you had all the drinking water you wanted and that sort of thing.
Were any other personal items in short supply on the ship?
Personal what?
Items.
In short supply?
Yeah.
I don't recall any. As I sit here today, there may have been.
Any humorous stories involving shipboard life?
Offhand, I can't really think of any. This afternoon, I'll think about some after this is all over, probably.
Did your enlisted men pranks ever test or exceed limits?
Did they ever what?
Test or exceed limits.
It sounds like, did they exceed the speed limit? But I didn't catch it. I'm sorry. Try me again. Did the enlisted men
pranks ever test or exceed limits?
Pranks?
Mm-hmm.
No. Outside of the torpedo men making cocktails out of pineapple juice and torpedo alcohol, that's the only one I can remember. Everybody had his own coffee pot, usually made out of a used shell casing, which they wired up in some crazy fashion to make coffee. Everybody had a coffee pot stowed away someplace.
When you weren't working or standing watch, what pastimes were available?
Reading, basically.
Were movies available?
Movies, that was a big thing, were the movies on the fantail. You get your movie, and if you got a good one, you sometimes could trade that for 2 other movies from some other ship if you had a particularly good one. So it was up to the movie officer to get a good movie when he went ashore. If he got a bad one, he was in bad shape.
Were snacks and treats available?
What kind?
Were snacks and treats available?
Snacks?
Yeah.
Well, they had a ship store, and they had all kinds of candy in the ship store. I guess that's all I could think of as a snack.
Did your ship ever have swim call?
Swim call? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just jump over the side and go swimming. Everybody wore skivvies. They didn't go au natural, as they say in Spain.
What holidays at sea? Thanksgiving, Christmas? Oh, what about holidays at sea?
Holidays?
Experiences about holidays at sea, like Thanksgiving or Christmas?
Well, I think the main link to holidays was mail from home, and if you got mail from home, especially around the holidays, it helped your outlook on life considerably.
What about religious services?
I don't recall any shipboard religious services. We had burial of the dead at sea, religious service, but usually the religious service is on when you're tied up alongside a tender. They usually had a priest on board, or if you got on some established shore base, they'd have in our case, a mass or religious services, but not on shipboard. At least on our size ship, they didn't have. I'm sure on the bigger ones they did.
Do you have any stories regarding crossing the equator or international date line?
I didn't get below the equator. We got about 2 degrees north, and that's as close as we got. International date line, we went by that with a flash. There wasn't any particular ceremony on that.
Did you visit any interesting ports?
Interesting. Well, I went to Bizerte and Tunis in North Africa. I thought that was interesting. Manila. Got ashore on Guam. Didn't get ashore on Okinawa. Got ashore in Japan. We were in Tokyo Bay when they signed the surrender ceremonies. I don't know how we rated that, but we got up there for that. That was good.
What was your longest stretch at sea before you were given liberty?
What about liberty?
What was your longest stretch at sea before you were given liberty?
Oh. Even when we got liberty, it wasn't much to haul about. Once we left Hawaii, liberty was a little far and few between. Liberty out in the forward area consisted of hot beer on Mogmog Island in Ulithi, and that's about all you did. And there wasn't any real place to go ashore for all the time we were out there until the end of the war.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
Mail, the only way you could do it.
How frequent was mail call?
Every time you'd pull up alongside a ship that had mail delivered to it, you'd get your mail, and sometimes you'd get mail that would go back a month. You'd get it all at once sometimes. Sometimes a lot the worse for wear.
Regarding mail call, did you have any censorship responsibilities?
Yes, I had to censor enlisted men's mail in my division.
How did you feel when you were finally discharged?
Happy. I never looked back. It's only in recent years that I think I began to appreciate my World War II service.
Thank you for sharing these experiences with future generations. Is there any other comments you would like to add?
I'm just happy to be here as long as I am. I've enjoyed this interview, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.